Let me talk a little bit about defending the undefendable. The reason I wrote this is I was writing my PhD dissertation on rent control, and I started out, it was sort of interesting, you know, it was sort of like minimum wage, rent control is another area which is obvious, and then it got boring. And there was the war in Vietnam going on, and I knew if I left the PhD program, I'd go over and shoot people who never did me any harm, and I didn't want to do that. So I had to finish the PhD, but it was really hard. It was very boring. It was just econometrics. I mean, I had written the theoretical chapters, which was interesting, and now all I had to do was econometrics. And it was very, very boring. So I played a game with myself. I said, well, if you do these 3 equations, you can take a whole day off and do whatever you want. I bargained with myself. It's a little schizophrenic, but what the heck. This is true confessions time. So I would do the dissertation, a few equations, and then I would take a whole day off, and I would write whatever I wanted, and I would write what a great God a pimp was. Don't ask why, but that's what I wrote. And then I would do another few equations, and I'd say, well, how great is blackmail? Blackmail is wonderful. And then I would do a topic on, and now I'm going to read off the chapters: the prostitute, the pimp, the male chauvinist pig, the drug pusher, addict, blackmailer, slanderer and libeler, denier of academic freedom, advertiser, person who yells fire in a crowded theater, another favorite of mine, the gypsy cab driver, the ticket scalper, the dishonest cop, the non-government counterfeiter, miser, inheritor, moneylender, non-contributor to charity, curmudgeon, slumlord, ghetto merchant, he charges more to the poor, speculator, importer, middleman, profiteer, another favorite of mine, you know, exploiting people, making profits off of them, strip miner, litterer, waste maker, fat capitalist, pig employer, scab, rate buster, employer of child labor, which is another bad thing. And by the time I finished my dissertation, I had like 30 essays. And I figured, you know, I might as well try to get a book out of it. And I sent it out to, about 10 publishers, and I got a rejection from all of them, or they ignored it. And then I'd send it out to maybe 50 publishers, and they all either ignored it or rejected it. And then I got a list of all publishers. There were about 500 of them. And I sent... you know, I sort of, when I get a rejection, my attitude, whether it's for a book or an article, pearls before swine. You know, if I believe in stuff, I keep pushing. And I've had articles of mine rejected 15 or 20 times. 30 times is my world's record. And it takes about a half a year to get a referee journal to reject your paper on average. So some of these papers are 15 years old, but, you know, I'm still pushing, and I sometimes get them published. So I send the manuscript to this book to 500 publishers, and either they ignored me or rejected it, except I got 3 publishers to say, yes, send me more chapters, or, you know, they expressed some interest, and one of them actually published it. The thing came out in 1976, and it's still selling. Not a lot. It's not selling anything like Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, but it's still selling several hundred copies or several thousand a year. It sold tens of thousands. I now have a second book that's going to be published either at the end of this year or very early next year, and I'm very fortunate to have Ron Paul have written an introduction to it. And I've already got Defending 3 and 4 on in the pipeline. So in the next 2 or 3 years, there's going to be a lot of defending the undefendable. I want to tell another story, and this is the commentary or the introduction or the support for the book from Friedrich Hayek. Let me read it, it's very short. Looking through Defending the Undefendable made me feel that I was once more exposed to the shock therapy by which, more than 50 years ago, the late Ludwig von Mises converted me to a consistent free market position. Even now I am occasionally at first incredulous and feel that this is going too far, but usually find in the end that you are right. That is me. Some may find it too strong a medicine, but it will still do them some good even if they hate it. A real understanding of economics demands that one disabuse oneself of many dear prejudices and illusions. Popular fallacies in economics frequently express themselves in unfounded prejudices against other occupations, and in showing the falsity of these stereotypes, you're doing a real service, even though you will not make yourself more popular with the majority. when I saw that, I practically fell over. I mean, he's comparing me to Mises, and this is when I was, I don't know, 30 years old, a young pup. I'd never done anything, and Hayek is comparing me to Mises. I thought he was drunk, or I don't know, or a weirdo. One of the problems I've had is he wrote this book, Road to Serfdom, that I regard as a real sellout, commie, pinko piece of crap. And I wrote about that, but in my article on that, I said, you know, I'm doing this with a little bit of feeling of, you know, biting the hand that feeds you. I mean, Hayek was nice enough to support my book, and here I'm trashing him. And I said, but I'm still doing it in his spirit, the spirit of getting at the truth, which is another reason why we're interested in libertarianism and Austrianism, whether or not other people are interested in it or not, or whether we convert anyone, because it's true. And we want to support the truth. And so I think, and I encourage my students to criticize me. And I encourage all of you to criticize me. The only way we're going to get 1/1,000,000th of an inch closer to the proverbial truth with a capital T is by dialoguing and criticizing each other. And we do it in a friendly way to try to get 1 inch or 1/1,000,000th of an inch closer to the truth. So it's in that spirit, I think, also, that we're libertarians and or Austrian economists, because it's true, and we want to witness the truth. It's a human condition deep within us. I did want to make a comment on Vinay's point about benevolence. I think that obviously capitalism is benevolent in the sense that it supports the poor. Someone was asking during the break, well, what about the poor? You know, under capitalism, where will the poor, how will the poor suffice? And the obvious answer to that is, where will the poor be better off? In a capitalist system where everyone is relatively rich, or in a socialist system where you equalize poverty? Obviously, you're much better off in a richer society if you're poor or handicapped or whatever. Okay, with these introductory remarks, let me talk about a few of the chapters. Obviously, I can't cover all of them. There are about 30, 35 chapters, and maybe we won't cover all of them even in the question period. But I do have an email address, wblock. Take notes, this will be on the quiz. And if you have questions that are not answered, please feel free to email me, and I will try to do what I can't do now in such a large group. I'm wblock, W-B-L-O-C-K, at loino.edu. And I guess this goes for people out there in television land or who are going to see this later. L is in Lewis, O is in Oliver, Y is in yellow, N-O for New Orleans, .edu for education. So email me, and I'll try to answer any questions that I haven't been able to, or that other people haven't been able to because of the necessary limitations of this conference. Okay, so let me take a few of the more controversial chapters and talk about them, and then call for dialogue and discussion. One of them is blackmail. Now, what blackmail doesn't have a good press. You know, if you're a blackmailer, you're a bad guy. But what is it that the blackmailer is threatening? What he's threatening is to be a gossip, right? I know that you take a bath with a rubber ducky, and if people hear about this, they'll have nothing to do with you. You'll lose your job, you lose your spouse, this, that, and the other. So I come up to you and I say, give me $100 and I'll keep quiet about your rubber ducky fetish. And should it be illegal to tell people that you take a bath with a rubber ducky? Well, it's just gossip, it's free speech. So all I'm threatening is something that I have a right to do in any case. And I have the decency to offer you a way out, whereas if I'm a gossip, you're in trouble, because I'm going to let it out that you're a rubber ducky fetishist. Whereas if I have the decency to be a blackmailer, I say, give me $100 and I'll shut up. And if I renege, then you can sue me for violating a contract. Whereas you have to distinguish this from extortion. Now, extortion is also a threat coupled with a demand for money or other services or what have you. But in extortion, what I'm threatening is something that I have no right to do and no right to threaten. There was a question, suppose somebody is threatening you, do you have a right to shoot him? Yeah. I mean, there is always a continuum. Obviously, if somebody threatens somebody in a play, the actor doesn't have a right to shoot the guy because it's just a play. But and also, if I shake my fist at you and I'm 100 miles away from you, it's not much of a threat. It has to be sort of a clear and present threat. But what the extortionate is threatening is bodily violence. So you have to distinguish extortion from blackmail, and you have to favor, well, not favor blackmail, but oppose the prohibition, the legal prohibition. Right? There's always that distinction between favoring doing it and favoring legalizing it. So I favor legalizing it, and I've written about 35 different articles on blackmail, namely criticizing everybody else in the law reviews who said that blackmail should be illegal. And guess what? You'll never guess. Yes, I'm coming in with a book on blackmail, why we should favor the legalization of blackmail. So that's the blackmail chapter. Another favorite of mine is yelling fire in a crowded theater. There's a famous judge, Oliver Wendell Holmes in the U.S., who said, free speech is limited. We're not absolutists on free speech. By the way, I'm not an absolutist on free speech either. There are certain speeches that I think should be prohibited under libertarianism, namely threats. Look, I'm going to kill you if you don't give me money or something. I'm just kidding. Don't come after me. That was just an example. That is a speech act that, if I was serious about it, I have no right to do. So I don't think libertarians should be absolutists on free speech and say that anyone can say anything. But what Oliver Wendell Holmes said is, well, free speech isn't absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater, and therefore we can limit this speech and limit that speech and limit the third speech, and free speech is over. So in my own perverse way, what I try to do is come up with a case where you could yell fire in a crowded theater and it would be legitimate. And I call it the SM theater, sadomasochistic theater. Now, some of you people aren't into SM. Don't knock it until you've tried it. Now, usually you think of whippings. Oh, by the way, the joke of this is that the masochist says, "Beat me," to the sadist, and the sadist says, "No." So I imagine a sadomasochistic theater where instead of whipping, what we do is somebody yells fire and we all rush to the exit and we crush each other. It's a little different, but what the heck? It's sadomasochism. And would this be justified in the free society? Yes, if it was clearly announced that it was an SM theater. Now, if you guys did this now and yelled fire when there was no fire, you would be guilty of a contract violation. Because when we sell you a movie ticket or a ticket to a conference like this, the implicit contract is sit there and shut up or applaud or whatever or laugh at the right time, but don't yell fire in the crowded theater here because that's incompatible with the idea of the ticket. So I came up with one example where you could yell fire in a crowded theater, and it was my attempt to defend free speech. Okay, another one is, what do I have here? Let me look at my list. The slanderer and libeler. Okay, so now what I do is I'll use the rubber ducky case. I don't blackmail you, I just slander you, and I say falsely or truly, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You take a bath with a rubber ducky, and what I used to do when I would give this speech is I would get the names of about 15 or 20 different people in the audience, and I'd say, this one's a lesbian, this one's a pervert, this one's a weirdo, and then I said, what I've now done is I've engaged in slander, which is in speech, or libel, which is in writing, and I've impugned your reputation. Now, reputation is very important. A lot of businesses are sold where the capital value isn't just $1 million, but the goodwill is $5 million, and it sells for $6 million because the goodwill or the reputation is very valuable, more valuable than the physical attributes of the company. And if I impugn your reputation, you get fired, you lose your spouse, you lose your friends, this, that, and the other, it's very, very important to you. So the idea here is, haven't I violated private property rights? Don't you own your reputation? And the answer is, paradoxically, no, you don't own your reputation, because your reputation consists not of what you think about yourself, but of what we all think about you. My reputation consists not of what I think about myself, but what you all think about me. So therefore, paradoxically, you cannot own your reputation, because your reputation consists of the thoughts of other people, and you don't own other people unless you've engaged in a voluntary slave contract with them, which we'll leave to the side for the moment. You don't own other people's thoughts, and if your reputation consists of nothing but other people's thoughts, then you don't own your reputation. Therefore, if your reputation is ruined by me talking about rubber duckies and stuff, I didn't steal anything that is yours. Where if I took your wristwatch or your jacket or your shoes, then I'm stealing something you own. But if I steal your reputation, I'm not taking something you own. Rather, I'm taking something that consists of other people's thoughts, which you don't own. Second paradox, reputations would be safer, not more endangered, but safer in a free society where there is no law against libel and slander. Because right now you go to the newspapers and there's help wanted, and there's boats for sale and houses for sale and this and that, and singles ads, you know, I want to meet a girl, whatever. In addition, there would be slander columns. This one's a commie, this one's a pinko, this one's a libertarian, whatever. And no longer would a mere allegation suffice to ruin anyone's reputation, because it would come so thick and fast, and people would now say, well, yes, they say he takes a bath with a rubber ducky, but is it true? Whereas under present conditions with libel laws, the view is more like, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. So if somebody says it, it must be at least partially true. So the libel laws really help the New York Times, because they can say whatever they want with impunity, and you know, if you sue them, you go up against the battery of lawyers that are very high paid and pay off judges and stuff, so you're in trouble. It doesn't really help the little guy, so to speak. Okay, another chapter. Well, I've got child labor. And what the deal with child labor is, the reason we don't have child labor anymore is because we're much richer and we can afford not to have children work. But if we passed a child labor law before we were rich enough, the children would either die of starvation or would have to go into prostitution or something else, which would be worse than working in a chimney or in a factory or whatever it is. You get Dickens and all these left-wing novelists who are saying, you know, child labor is evil. And what the government does is every 10 or 20 years we get a little richer, and they say, okay, these children don't have to work anymore, or can't work anymore. So what they're trying to do, in effect, is take credit for the product of wealth increase due to the Industrial Revolution or due to free enterprise. They're trying to take credit for the fact that children aren't working. But the proof of the matter is that if you look at, if you pass a child labor law before the economy is ready to accept it, then you consign the children to death. So the employer of child labor is a good guy. We're defending him. What all these chapters have in common, and why I call it defending the undefendable, and by the way, there is no word undefendable. I've learned that. It shows what an illiterate person I am. And the word is indefensible, but undefendable sounds better, so I used it, and I'm going to keep doing it, and maybe I'll start a new word. Okay, let me get another chapter or two, and then we'll call for some questions or discussion. I'm not going to discuss the drug pusher or the drug addict, because we've talked about legalization of drugs. The non-government counterfeiter is perhaps the only one that has been criticized by people I respect and admire. There is Bob Murphy and Matt McKay and Laura Davidson. These are all Austro-libertarians who have written articles criticizing this chapter, and I wrote a reply. What I'm saying is counterfeiting legitimate money is obviously a crime. It's fraud. But how about counterfeiting counterfeit money? And fiat currency, by the way, fiat currency has got nothing to do with the automobile dealer in Italy or anything like that. It's made-up currency with no backing. if you counterfeit money, what you're doing is undermining counterfeit money. Namely, you're undermining something evil, and therefore you're doing something good. The denial of a negative is a positive. So my idea is, well, he's a hero. Don't try it at home, you know, they'll come and get you, but you're a hero. And my critics are saying, well, if you do that, you'll play havoc with money, which is true. But my very radical idea is that if you people deal with the devil, the government, you take your risks. And this sort of underlies Murray Rothbard's idea of the government should renege on its debt. Anybody who lent the government money is an aider and abetter of evil and deserves what he gets. Well, to some degree, it's true of fiat currency. It's true we all have to use it, and I use it myself, but the point is that when you do it, you have to realize you're playing with a hot stove. So this is an interesting debate because the other critics are, you know, just a bunch of ignorant, savage lefties that don't know anything. But these people I really respect. One of the book reviews in the Sunday London Times said that the only good thing about this book were the cartoons. And I didn't draw the cartoons. A guy named Rodriguez drew the cartoons. I saw something of his in Playboy about the pimp, and it's in there, and I said, wow, this guy is speaking my language. So I gave him all the chapters, and he said, well, what should I do? I said, I don't know, you're the artist, you know, just draw as you feel, you know, read the thing and then draw it. And on the cover, it's go inherit your own money. I'm attacking inheritance on that one. Let me take another chapter or two. The miser, a person who doesn't spend as much money as the Keynesian monetarists think he should and instead puts the money under his mattress. What he's doing is lowering the price level slightly compared to the situation where he would have spent his money, a very small amount, but still. So he's really a benefactor. He is making our cash balances worth more. So he's imparting a benefit to us. It's true the Keynesians don't like it because they think that the only way to have a sound economy is everyone has to keep spending, spending, spending. But as Austrians, we know that that's nonsense. So the miser is another hero. Let me talk about the hero business. Right now I'm wearing a blue and red striped tie. Nothing particular about this, but suppose they passed a law that you couldn't wear a blue striped tie. Then wouldn't I be heroic in wearing one against the law? Do you get the idea? Wearing a blue tie is no big deal. But if they pass a law, an unjust law, saying you can't wear a blue tie, then wearing a blue tie becomes heroic. So what I'm saying is that a lot of these activities ought to be legal in a free society, but they're not legal. Therefore, the people who do them are heroic, whether they know it or not. They're acting heroically in violating an unjust law. And it's not just unjust laws, because there are certain chapters that are not illegal, but everybody hates it. And what you're now doing is going against public opinion, which seems heroic to me if the public opinion is unjustified in the first place. Okay, let me take another chapter or two, and then the dishonest cop. That's a good one. Suppose a cop sees a pornographer, prostitute, drug runner, whatever it is. What should he do if he were a libertarian? He should just ignore it, turn the other cheek or turn the eye away from it. He should just let the people do it. There was this friend of mine, I won't mention his name. He was a lawyer, and he was offered a judgeship in Arizona. And I said, take it, take it, take it. And you let a lot of victimless criminals go. And this moron, what he did is he wrote to the guy who invited him and said, look, when it comes to real crime, I'll be a good judge. You know, if there's a murderer or a rapist or a murderer, I'll do a good job. But when it comes to victimless criminals, I'm going to let them all go because I'm a libertarian. And guess what? They rescinded his offer to be a judge. And I had a full head of hair before that. And look at me now. This would have been great. Now, obviously, he couldn't let all of the bad guys go. because then he would be fired, but he could let more go than anyone else. Which reminds me of something else I wrote about the libertarian concentration camp guard in the Nazi Germany. Could there be such a thing? And I said, yes. Because let's suppose that the quota of killing Jews is 100 a day. And I become a Nazi concentration camp guard, and I only kill 90, and I let 10 of them go. And at the end of the week, I've saved 70 people who otherwise would have died for sure. We stipulate that. Am I a hero? Well, I violated the non-aggression axiom, or the non-aggression principle, slightly. Killed 90 people. And therefore, I should be made to pay this. And I think that Conrad was quite right. When there's somebody who's dead, well, then the heirs of the victim would be the people that you would compensate. I mean, the guy is no longer alive to be compensated, but his wife and kids can now benefit from the labor of the murderer. So what I would say is that if any one of the relatives of the 90 people that I killed, or the 900 people I killed, 90 a day, 7 days, 630 people, whatever it is, if any one of them wants to execute me, they have that right, because I did kill innocent people. On the other hand, this is why it's pretty heroic to do this, because I'd be putting myself in death's way by saving 10 people a day, or saving 70 people in the week. My hope would be that I would tell the heirs of the people that I killed that I had to kill them, otherwise I couldn't save anyone, and that if you want me, I'm yours, you can execute me or whatever, but I did my best to save life. And if we stipulate that they would have died anyway, there's a case. Well, that's what I meant in this chapter. What should the cop who sees a prostitute do? He should let her go. And if he doesn't let her go, he can maybe charge her. He say, okay, pay me $50, or pay me half your earnings, which she would be happy to do because she values her freedom more than half that day's earnings. So this is a very dishonest cop. He's taking bribes. But I say a cop who takes a bribe to let a prostitute go, assuming that the prostitute is engaging in adult consensual behavior, is better than a cop who obeys the law, because obeying an unjust law is not cool, not kosher, not good, not libertarian. We have to look at law through the eyeglasses of libertarianism, and libertarianism says that if you do something invasive, well, then you're a bad guy, but if you do a victimless crime, then you're not. One last one. I keep saying one more chapter. At this rate, I'll never have any questions, but maybe we should do one more. The ghetto merchant, the guy who charges more. He's in Harlem, and Harlem is a black area, and it's a high crime area, and he's got a grocery there, and he charges more. Why? Because the costs of doing business are much higher there than out in Scarsdale or in mid-Manhattan, where it's safer. And naturally, the leftists and the blacks and other people protest because he's exploiting the people. But he's not making any more profit than the grocers in the white area, because if he were, then the grocers in the white area would come to the black area to exploit the black people until profits were equilibrated, assuming risk. So the only reason, and here Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams, two black economists who can say things in a way that white economists can't because of their skin color, are forever talking about things like this very aptly and very heroically, because they're considered, what is it, Oreo cookies? Black on the outside and white on the inside? Because they're against socialism, and somehow to be a black you have to be a socialist, which is a little silly, but that's the Weltanschauung. Okay, I've given some background on this, and now I'll call for some questions.
Thank you. Could you please defend the mother who aborts?
The mother who aborts?
Yes. Ah,
okay. I paid him $5 to ask that question. I regard this as a very important question. I think that the abortion issue is an issue that divides not only the general society, but divides libertarians as well. For example, Ron Paul is pro-life, Murray Rothbard was pro-choice. And both of them are libertarians that I revere. I am pro-life in attitude. I think every individual person is a potential Mozart or a potential Murray Rothbard. Life is precious, life is wonderful. I'm against killing, I'm pro-life. But I note that we pro-lifers are losing. Not only are we losing in the U.S. and many Western countries, but they even have this despicable thing called partial birth abortion, where the baby is 8.5 months old and perfectly viable outside of the womb. And yet what they do is they go into the woman's uterus and suck out the brains of the baby and pull them out dead. I mean, if that's not despicable, then nothing is. We're losing this battle. So one of my motivations is to help out the pro-life side. Another is to apply libertarianism. And libertarianism is based on the non-aggression principle and private property rights, and who owns the mother's womb? Well, then the mother does. And therefore, any trespasser, oh, by the way, I assume that life begins at fertilization, because the sperm alone and the egg alone will not become a human being, but the fertilized egg will under the right environment. By the way, do you know when the fetus is viable in the Jewish tradition? When it graduates from medical school? Actually, it's when there's a heartbeat, but we won't go into that. So I regard the fertilized egg, the fetus, as a human being, a small one, but a rights-bearing creature because it's a human being and will potentially grow up into a viable human being. But I also regard the womb as the mother's property. Therefore, the unwanted fetus is a trespasser. And we have a right to evict trespassers in the gentlest manner possible, but we have a right to evict them. Now, in the case of rape, it's easy to see this. A woman's walking down the street, she's grabbed, she's impregnated, and now she's got something growing in her, and if that's not a trespasser, I don't know what is. Happily, medical technology will now can now safeguard all babies in the last trimester, the 7th, 8th, and 9th month. So if we adopt evictionism, namely that the mother has a right to evict but not to kill or not to murder, then in one fell swoop we save 1/3 of babies. 1/3 of babies can no longer be killed, can no longer be victimized by partial birth abortion. And as medical technology improves, maybe in 10 or 15 years, we'll be able to save all babies in the 6th month. And then in 25 more years in the 5th month. And eventually, we'll be able to save all babies. Because you know in 200 years from now, medical technology will advance, if we haven't blown ourselves up by then, to the point where even a fertilized egg can be put in a petri dish or in a test tube or in a host mother or something like that, and it'll be viable. So if we adopt this compromise theory, which I regard as a principled compromise, we will eventually win, and we will be doing justice right now because the unwanted fetus is a trespasser. As I say, it's easy to see in the case of rape, but suppose the mother engages in voluntary sexual intercourse and now she has a baby. It's still a trespasser because just because you invite someone in doesn't mean you have to keep them there. The example I use is I have a boat and I'm floating along and I'm in the middle of the Atlantic or the Pacific. I'm 1,000 miles from shore and I see you swimming. You're swimming around. I don't know how you got there. Maybe aliens grabbed you up and dropped you in the middle of the ocean. I don't know. All I know is I saved you, and now I got you on my boat, and I give you food, and I let you sleep. And now I say, by the way, get out of my boat. You're trespassing. Do I have a right to do it? Well, if we take private property rights seriously, we have to take it seriously in difficult cases. We can't be superficial defenders of free enterprise and private property rights. We have to be radical defenders of it. And radical defenders of it means it's my boat, and you get the hell off. Now, people say, well, that's not very nice. I agree it's not very nice. It would be nice if I would, save you, but there are no positive obligations in libertarianism. The only obligation you have is to keep your goddamn mitts off of other people and their property. So my claim is the reason it's so difficult for people to get their minds around the abortion issue is it's a complex issue. Because abortion consists of not one thing, but two things. One, eviction, two, killing. It's just like unionism. What's the libertarian view on unions? Well, unions do two things. If they just did the one legitimate thing, we would favor them, or at least oppose any laws to outlaw them. What's the legitimate things that unions do? They have mass quits. An individual has the right to quit. Look, the only problem with coercive slavery is you couldn't quit. Otherwise, slavery was a pretty good deal. You could pick cotton, you could sing songs, you know, they give you gruel, but you couldn't quit. If you could quit, slavery would, all the venom would be taken out of slavery. So if an individual wants to quit a job, if he can't, he's a slave, so he can quit. And if other people quit at the same time, if he goes to the boss and says, look, it's not just me who wants a raise, and if you don't give me the raise, I'm going to quit, but all 500 of us are going to quit, unionism would be fine. But they do something else too, and that is they circle the owner's property and they refuse to allow competing workers, they call them scabs in the U.S., to compete for the jobs. Look, divorce is a very bad thing, but if you divorce your wife, you can't surround her house with your friends and anyone that she tries to date you beat up. That would be what the union does when it engages in scabs, whether it does it by beating up scabs or by passing labor legislation to that effect. So unionism is a complex thing because it consists of two things that are very different. Well, so is it in the case of abortion. It consists of two very different things that we must distinguish: killing and evicting. And it just so happens that in the first 6 months, if you evict, you'll also kill. And I say, tough. As a hard-nosed libertarian who believes in private property rights, it's too bad. It's your property, or rather the mother's property, and she has a right to evict but not to kill. And as medical technology progresses, there'll be more and more babies who will be viable outside. Now, some people say, well, there's a contract, there's an implicit contract, and I'm open to implicit contracts. If you go to a restaurant and order a cup of coffee and drink it down, and then they present you with a bill for $7 trillion, no. There was an implicit contract that, you know, was some ordinary price, maybe a little higher in a nightclub or something, but, you know, even $100 for a cup of coffee would be too much. But, you know, $6, $7, what the heck. So I'm open to implicit contracts. But except in the case of the host mother, there is no implicit contract at the point of intercourse. Now, let me explain the birds and bees to you people. See, the way it works is when you have intercourse, there is no fertilized egg yet. Rather, the sperm travels up some tube or other. I'm a little weak on biology. And then a half hour later or a couple of hours later, then it intersects with the egg, and then you have a fertilized egg. But at the point of intercourse, there's no one to have an implicit contract with. And if you're going to have an implicit contract, you have to have someone to have it with, namely this baby, assuming that this baby is able to make a contract, but I'll let that pass. The only exception is the host mother. If a couple is infertile and they hire a woman to take the husband's sperm and put it into her and have the baby, and now she cannot renege on that. She can't evict because that would violate the contract. Because there's not an implicit contract, there's an explicit contract. Although in the U.S. it's illegal to do this for reasons that need not concern us now. Well, you know, they're a bunch of pinkos, that's why. So except for that, there is no one to have an implicit contract with. So therefore, the woman who engages in voluntary intercourse has a right to evict because she's not violating any implicit contract with the baby because the baby didn't exist at the time of intercourse. The baby only came into being a couple of hours after the intercourse. So that's my talk on that undefendable case. I think it's very important. I think it's one of the most creative things I've come up with. And yet it's been a hard sell. Even among libertarians, people, their guts tell them not because it's a baby and, you know, our milk of human kindness comes out and you don't want, pro-life people don't want people killed. I gave a speech on this at the Ron Paul gathering and I got booed by libertarians, which is problematic because the people that Ron Paul attracts are not really libertarians yet. They're just libertarians in the making, and they don't understand civilized discourse. Namely, you don't only have to hear things you agree with, you can hear things you disagree with too. So that was quite an experience for me. Thanks for the question. Next
Okay.
Who's got the
I
microphone?
have this.
Go ahead.
Yeah. At the moment, there's a popular perception of a political split. There's left wing and right wing. In other words, you're either a kind-hearted, caring socialist or you're a rabid, greedy capitalist. How does this prevent the truth coming out and the understanding of libertarians who are neither left wing nor right wing, but up wing? For example, in the Nolan chart.
I didn't hear your last sentence.
We are neither left wing nor right wing, but I prefer to call us up wing.
Upwing.
Upwing,
Yeah.
as in the Nolan chart.
Right, the Nolan chart. I agree that the left-right spectrum is a violation of libertarianism. There's no place for us on it. I mean, whenever I take surveys of whether I'm a left-winger or a right-winger, I answer all the economics as a right-winger and all the personal liberties as a left-wing, and I come out as a moderate. Let me clue you in. I'm not really a moderate, although sometimes I try to call myself Walter Moderate Block, but it's not really true. The left-right spectrum is wrong. On economics, we're right-wing in the sense of free market. On personal liberties, we're left-wing. And on foreign policy, I don't know where we are, but both the Republican and the Democratic parties are warmongers to various degrees. So we're sui generis, we're unique, we're not on the political spectrum. I mean, the political spectrum has Stalin on the left and Hitler on the right. And the political spectrum is supposed to be that the closer you are on the spectrum, the closer you are in reality. But Hitler and Stalin are on opposite sides of the spectrum, and yet there's not a dime's worth of difference between them. They're both socialists, the National Socialist Party, the Nazis. And then you have Ron Paul, who's a right-wing guy, just like Hitler. I mean, that's the intellectual capacity of the left-right spectrum. So I think we have to reject the left-right spectrum and look at the Nolan chart, or I now teach at a Jesuit university. So I have a left-right and I have a north-south cross. And the north is good and bad, and the good is the non-aggression principle and private property rights, namely libertarians, and the bad is the other guys.
Yeah.
Who's got the microphone? Oh,
yeah. My question is the ovum a trespasser? Okay, it's in the I can't remember what the biology is, but you know, it grows inside the woman.
Right.
Is that a trespasser? Because if it's not a trespasser, then the fertilized egg is only half a trespasser. So how are you going to deal with that?
Well, the ovum is the egg, right?
Yeah.
I'm a little weak on this myself. The egg is part of the woman's body. I mean, it's no more a trespasser in the woman than the sperm is a trespasser to the man. But the fertilized egg will grow.
No, but it's only half a trespasser. Because half of it is...
No, the unfertilized egg is half a trespasser. Oh, I see what you're saying. If the fertilized egg is a trespasser, then the egg must be half a trespasser. Very clever. I haven't thought of that, but now that I think about it, and I understand what you're saying, I don't think it's true. I guess there's some sort of discontinuosity or discontinuity here. The egg is part of the woman's body, and it's not a trespasser because when she menstruates, it goes out of her, and I don't think anyone would claim that. So just because the fertilized egg could be a trespasser doesn't mean that half of it is also half a trespasser. It doesn't follow. But it's a very clever point. Thank you.
It's actually quite easy to clarify. It's part of her body, and her body has actually ejected the egg it would otherwise leave. Once it's fertilised, it becomes a separate entity, and this can be demonstrated because she can have an immune response that will reject it. So it's actually demonstrably not
right.
a part of it.
I mean, my hand is not a trespasser. I mean, it's part of my body, just like the egg is, or the sperm is part of the man's body. The egg is ejected, yes, during menstruation.
So trespassing implies you're coming in from the outside to begin with, and the egg hasn't come in, or the fertilization or after fertilization hasn't come in from the outside.
I don't think that trespassing is necessarily in from the outside, but certainly you'll agree that the sperm came in from the outside. The egg obviously didn't come in from the outside, but I quarrel with your definition of trespass that it has to come in from the outside. Look, suppose there were Martians or aliens that could put something into our bodies, let's say cancer cells, and it's not in from the outside because they somehow magically started in us. It's still a trespass. So I reject the argument that a trespasser is necessarily in from the outside, and you'll have to agree that the sperm is in from the outside.
In a few of your words, who is, was ist, a libertarian?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
In a few of your words, who is, was ist, a libertarian?
Who is what?
Who is what is a libertarian? Just in
Who
a
is
few of
what,
your words.
In my words, what is a libertarian? I've defined it the other day. A libertarian is someone who, well, a libertarian activist is someone who acts to promote this, but a person who believes in libertarianism, what is he believing in? I think what he's believing in is the two sides of the coin. One side is the non-aggression principle, keep your mitts to yourself, don't invade other people. The other is a theory of private property rights, so we can determine who the invader is. So libertarianism, in my view, would be you adhere to two principles: private property through homesteading, and as Conrad mentioned, other ways of getting private property rights, and the non-aggression principle. That's what libertarianism is. And if you ask most people, do you agree with this? They do. They just don't apply it rigidly, maniacally, even to a woman's body or people's bodies.
Talking about the dishonest cop, surely letting, say, a prostitute go is a violation of contract. If they didn't want to enforce unjust laws, surely they had the opportunity not to become a law enforcement officer.
The point is that if a policeman didn't want to violate rights, he wouldn't become a police officer?
Well, yeah, and if he then chooses to disobey laws that he or she disagrees with, surely that's a violation of contract.
Ah, yes, it's a violation of contract, but not all contracts are sacrosanct. If you make a contract with the devil, you can violate it.
Even if you had total free choice to get into that contract?
Yeah, sure. You can make a contract with the Nazis and say, yes, I'll be a good Nazi. And then what you do is you blow up their planes. What's wrong with that? Look, contracts are not the be-all and end-all, despite the views of the fractional reserve people. There's something more important than contract. Contract is just a way of transferring property rights. Much more important than contract is property rights. And when somebody is objectively evil, like, say, the Nazis or the commies, and you make a contract with them and then you blow up their planes, you're a good guy. So don't think that contracts are the be-all and end-all of libertarianism. Otherwise, we get into weird cases.
One last question.
Hi, Dr. Block. I share your sort of general viewpoint of being...
Let me correct you. Walter.
Okay, sorry. I share your general viewpoint of being pro-life, but I think, and I think there are certain problems with abortion. I'd like to put this by you. Could it be that the problem with abortion, the two things that are going on is, one, let's stipulate that abortion is murder, but on the other hand, if abortion is murder, does the government have the right to come in and prevent the woman from doing that act? Doesn't that assume a certain paternalism, a certain sense of the government owns the fetus that's been destroyed? What if this is perhaps just a standing issue, namely, if a woman commits abortion, does the government have the right to come in then on behalf of the fetus, or should that right be restricted to the heirs, in this case perhaps the parents of the fetus?
Well, there are really two issues. One is the anarchist issue of government or not, and let's put that to the side because we can only discuss coherently one subject at a time. So instead of calling it government, let's call it the forces of law and order, whoever they are. Do they have a right to compel the woman not to abort but to only evict? Yes. If a woman is contemplating killing and evicting, namely aborting, and the baby is in the 8th month and is perfectly viable outside of her body, and she's going to kill it anyway, she's a murderer, and the doctor that helps her is a murderer, and therefore the law should be, whether it's upheld by a government or private police agencies, that's a different issue, but whoever they are, they should say, look, lady, you do that and you're going to be a murderer, and you, doctor, who help her do that, you're going to be an aider and abetter of murder. Yes, this is murder. in the 8th, 9th, or the 7th, 8th, and 9th month now, and in 10 years in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th month. Yeah, that's the point. It is an unjustified act to kill when you could have just evicted. See, what the feminists want is they don't want just the right to not have the baby in them. They want the right to say, well, that man who impregnated me, I don't want his kid to live. But they have no such right, because the kid is innocent. The children are not guilty of the sins of the parents. This is an area we discussed under reparations before. And we can't punish the children. All we can do is take away stuff that the children get that they never should have got from their parents. But we don't punish the children for the sins of the father or the parents.
Thank you, Professor Block.